Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. As Europe reassesses its security architecture amid Russia's war against Ukraine and growing questions about America's long-term military commitment to the continent, Poland and the United Kingdom are preparing to sign a new defense and security treaty. The agreement comes as Warsaw deepens strategic partnerships across Europe while investing heavily in military capabilities of its own. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss the significance of these developments is Keir Giles, Senior Consulting Fellow in the Russia and Eurasia Program at Chatham House. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So looking at this treaty, while Poland and the UK are already close NATO allies, what does this new defense treaty add that existing NATO commitment do not?
Well, it's an indication that the existing treaty arrangements between Britain and Poland under NATO are considered to be insufficient to cover what are the new security threats emerging across Europe. And it's plugging those gaps, as far as we can tell from the official press releases that we've seen so far. It is looking at defense industry cooperation. It's looking at illegal migration, as well as the things that cover conventional military threats. So there's a range of different things that have been suggested are going to be in this treaty, but we've not actually had the final text of it released. But across the board, it looks like a deepening of that relationship between two key defense partners at the opposite ends of Europe.
Now, we are seeing Poland signing major security agreement with countries like France, UK, and soon Germany as well. Would you say that Warsaw is emerging as a central architect of Europe's new security framework?
Well, that's not a new trend. The simple fact that Poland was one of the first countries in Europe to take an interest in not only conventional defense but national security in the face of threats from the East and more broadly means that it has emerged as a leader. It's one of the countries that is closest to reaching its NATO spending targets for percentage of GDP on defense and was already there before even those targets were set. So it's natural that Poland will emerge as a pace setter for explaining to the rest of the continent what needs to be done to prepare for the threats that are facing us now.
Prime Minister Tusk has described these agreements as part of a strategy to, quote, strengthen Poland's security through partnership with countries willing to take defense seriously. Now, the last few words I wanted to pick out a little bit because I was wondering if this reflects growing concern about the reliability of broader European security arrangements.
Well, absolutely. And of course, we see this divide in the last book I wrote, which was actually called Who Will Defend Europe? I talked about the divide between countries that were on the front line and countries that were west of Warsaw. And it's those that have needed to understand more clearly what exactly is needed to be ready for the challenges that we're facing. And not all of those countries, including particularly the UK, have risen to the challenge and are investing what's necessary to keep themselves and their citizens safe in the future. So we have a situation where it is against the old stereotypes of the UK being the military heavyweight that would come to the assistance of countries further east. Actually, it's Poland that is leading the way and in some respects has a lot to show the UK.
Looking at the press conference before Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk went to the UK on the tarmac, he mentioned that this security deal is going to help enhance NATO and expand NATO's capabilities. But of course, there's also talks about potentially U.S. stepping away from NATO and, well, European countries need to take a bigger share of its defense. Do you see this move as a play where Poland can go either way, be it if the U.S. pulls away, they can take on more responsibility, or if NATO stays the way it is, at least we will see an enhancement of cooperation between the NATO members?
Well, it makes sense for Poland and every other country to spread its bets, but also, of course, to invest in that enhancement of its own defense capacity. Because this is not the first time that the United States has said that European countries need to take an interest in their own defense. And, of course, because Poland has done that, they've described Poland as one of their key partners within Europe. But the continent as a whole needs to develop its own capabilities to counteract all that stepping away from the United States. What exactly the United States is planning with withdraw at the moment is unclear and has been unclear for some time. Supposedly there will be a detailed briefing on the United States' force commitments to NATO coming up in June, but for the time being we have various conflicting statements, and it's really not at all sure what the United States will actually bring to the table in the event of a crisis. But whatever happens, it's clear that European countries need to be thinking more about looking after themselves without outsourcing their defense to a partner on another continent.
Right. Speaking of one of those statements, a military source close to the matter told TVP World here that the United States have briefed European allies on plans to reduce its deep strike capabilities in Europe by around 50%. Now, if this were to be confirmed, how significant would such a shift be for European security?
That's a major cut, but of course what exactly it refers to remains unclear. We've heard that report repeated variously as deep strike fires, as in long-range precision-guided munitions, or alternatively the means to deliver them, including aircraft, bombers, for example. So again, until we see precisely what it is that the United States is considering taking away, and very importantly, what timescale they're talking about for taking it away, it's very hard to assess the impact of the damage. If this is a scaled, phased, considered removal of capabilities at the pace at which European countries can replace them, that's far less of a challenge than a sudden pulling of the rug from under security arrangements that have been in place for decades.
Right, so of course a lot of details has yet to surface, and we'll have to see what comes out of it. Now, when it comes to Poland, there's another recent news being announced that Poland is being considered as a potential production site for Patriot missiles and is becoming a regional hub for servicing advanced military equipment as well. Are we seeing Poland evolving from a major defense customer to a key industrial power?
It's very likely that that will be the case with or without a relationship with Patriot missiles, because the defense-industrial relationships, too, are hostage to the next decision from the United States. And we've had U.S. partners saying that what that decision will be, they are just like us, waiting to hear what the next tweet is going to deliver. But in any case, because, again, Poland has this first-mover advantage, because it was the first to invest in bringing in, for example, Korean technology for heavy ground armor, it will serve as a center of expertise for rolling that out across Europe, and a center for other countries to look to when thinking about scaling up their own defense capacity.
Russia has long viewed closer military cooperation among European states with suspicion. How do you think Moscow is likely to interpret the growing network of defense agreement that Poland is building right now?
I think Moscow will be ambivalent about this. On the one hand, of course, any greater defense cooperation between European countries, if it actually delivers practical effect in making those countries safer, is a disadvantage for Moscow. On the other hand, it shows how dysfunctional the existing arrangements are, whether with NATO, whether with the EU, all of the different things that these agreements are trying to compensate for ought really to be already in place in a defensive network of European states. So it is both a step forward and an indication that things were not right to start with.
And taking a step back, looking at a broader strategic picture, is Europe moving towards greater defense autonomy, or better put it yet, how much autonomy do you think Europe can be fundamentally independent from American military power for this foreseeable future?
Is Europe moving towards? Yes. Is it fast enough? We don't know, but probably not. But the key point here that has come up in conversation about this latest possible U.S. announcement is that Europe should not be looking to replace the United States like for like, not trying to invest the billions that it would take to replace directly those capabilities that are being taken away, but instead find other ways of securing itself that are more suitable to its own circumstances. Because the fundamental task is deterring Russia. And if Russia can be deterred by other means than the capabilities that the United States is taking away, that are more easy to generate organically within Europe as a continent, then that is the way to go.
Right, that's actually very interesting. If you can help us unpack that a little bit more, because I think you're right in stating that, well, we shouldn't look to it as replacing it like for like, but also look for ways to innovate around it. What are some of the possibilities that Europe might be able to pursue?
Well, let's consider the way in which the frontline states have, even before they learned from the experience of Ukraine, understood that long-range deep strike into Russia is the means of deterring Moscow, by making sure that if Russia does attempt some kind of military adventurism in those eastern flank countries, the effect of it will not be limited to that country and will affect Russia itself. Now, that's been confirmed many times over by what we see in Ukraine and the pattern of deep strikes having a severe impact on Russian perception of the war now. But it's also something that countries like Finland, and even with its tiny defense budget, Estonia, had attempted to invest in heavily in order to give themselves options for deterring Russia instead of just fighting a defensive war. Now that is under threat at the moment, but not because of deliberate interruptions of supply by the United States, but because the US is diverting those capabilities, those munitions, those long-range precision-guided strike weapons to replace its own stockpiles after it fired off vast quantities of them in the Iran war. So that means there is a need, even more urgent now, for European countries and European defense industry to develop their own alternatives to doing that, which are able to hold targets in Russia at risk without relying on the United States.
Hey, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.